So today I'm going to show you how to assemble a pot that you've thrown in separate pieces. I like to throw hollow rings and join them into the pot, and so I'm going to show you today how I make one of my pots. And so what I do is and these can be much bigger sections. I've thrown 20-pound sections. I might try to throw some 25-pound sections to see, how unwieldy that is. But like, you got to throw the amount of weight that you can handle, that you can wedge, that you can center. And I found 20 pounds to be a pretty manageable weight for me to get a nice big piece of clay. But these are 10-pound pieces. And what we have here, I've set one up for you here. That's these three pieces. You throw a bottom, and then you take calipers. Let me grab my calipers real quick. Use a metal caliper, and it has little pointed tips on it, and you measure the width of the pot for when you take it off the wheel for the bottom piece, and then you use that measurement to make sure that the piece that's going on top of that is going to be the same width when you're throwing it on the wheel. So that's what you're working on the wheel with the calipers, is to make sure that they're going to sit together nicely. So you measure what's going to be the bottom of the center piece to be the same as the top of the bottom piece with the calipers. That's how you get them to line up. And then you do the same thing here with the calipers to line up with the top piece, like that. Okay, so that's what you're doing. And then once you have your pieces thrown, and also I want to point out, when you throw your centerpiece, your cylinder, this part, in fact, I think I left that untrimmed so I could show you. Leave a little lip there. This is the bottom where I left a thick and kind of a lip there, so that it has something to sit on, so that when you pick it up off your bat, it's not going to warp all over and bend around, because you have something that's sort of solid there. If you throw the whole thing this thin all the way down, you may have a little bit of trouble with it wiggling around, moving around. Now, another thing that I'm going to do when I join these pieces together, go back over here, is I'm going to use these rings, and this piece is going to set on this piece, and I'm going to join them together on the wheel. I want to use the wheel so that I can center, and then I can level, and I can center things together so that it's all nice and neatly lined up. If you try to just do it by hand over here, things are going to be a little wonky. Maybe you want that, and maybe that's fine with you, but if you want to line them up, I say get back on the wheel and to assemble them. And I've rolled out some coils, because I'm going to use these coils in between here to join the pieces of clay. And it's kind of like you're hand building on the wheel with these separate parts. So this piece is going to have a foot, and at the top of this piece, it's going to have, I think it's this one, it's going to have kind of a fat lip. I like having these big thick lips at the top, and when I join that, you won't see the seam here. It'll just sort of flow together. I like having a fat lip at the top because it kind of makes the pot look thick and sturdy, even when the pot is not very thick. And these are hollow, so it's not adding a ton of weight to the pot in the end. So this will look like this, and this, and this other piece. This is actually the foot for the other one, but this other piece, I'm going to cut it this way, make two cuts here, cut it in half, and use those to be handles on either side of this piece. And I'm going to show you how to put handles on made from the ring. So let's get over to the wheel and start assembling some things over there. Okay, so now we're going to attach a ring to the top piece first, and sometimes I make the decision for which parts I'm going to join first in terms of if I have some that are a little bit soft or ones that are getting a little drier. I want to start with the drier ones first to make sure that I don't put too much weight on the soft clay. Sometimes you have to juggle that a little bit depending on how fast your pieces are drying. This is where I like to use a fork to do some scoring. So I'm going to mark up this area where the ring is going to be sitting with a fork, and we call this scoring. And I have to get this sticky because if your clay is a little on the dry side and you're trying to join it together, it's just going to come back apart. You're going to get a nice big crack there. So make sure that whatever you're joining together, it's pretty sloppy wet, right where it's connecting, so it does a good sort of a weld with the other clay. And I always like to use some what I call fresh clay, nice wet clay that's straight from the bag, so that I have something that's definitely going to attach. And I sort of think about this in relationship to, let's say, welding metal. You got to have something soft and sticky that's going to stick to everything. And so I'm gonna pinch this down a little skinnier, push this down onto that wet clay that I just created on this lip, giving myself kind of what I think of as a weld to join that other piece of clay to this. So get that on that nice sticky clay, push it on there, pinch it thinner than what I have. Maybe you'll start with a smaller coil. Get that on there all the way around. And you want to start with a coil that you've made that's pretty consistently the same thickness, so that when you're manipulating it, you can sort of trust it to be that. Now, the next thing you're going to do is you're going to want to join that piece of clay a little bit more to your piece, so that there's no concern about it pulling away while you're trying to join with the other one. So you put this on and you kind of attach it more. Not attached on the inside there. And then I'm going to do a little overlap with it onto the lip of the pot, so that it just sort of becomes like the top of the pot for the next piece of clay to stick to. Okay. So now we're ready for the next piece of clay, but we're also gonna kind of get this ready a little bit more with some scoring and spraying. Get it wet. Okay, so this is the piece that I want to attach. And in order to get this on appropriately, first of all, I'm gonna sort of figure out where it kind of sits, and then, ooh, it wants to stick already. I'm gonna score that. Both sides have to be receptive. You can't just score and wet one side, you gotta score and wet the other side too. Get that nice and sticky. Now I'm going to sit it in there, and then what I'm going to do next is I'm going to kind of check the level to see how it's sitting there. And I can see that it needs to shift. Push this side down a little bit. Okay, that's about level, but I also need to check and see if it's centered. I'm just going to take my needle tool, hold it up to that piece, and see what happens where it touches the most. Probably needs to be pushed a little bit in. So I'm going to slide it slightly. Before I really join this piece on there, I want to center it, I want to level it. I think it's pretty centered, so I'm going to double check the level now. Just a tiny bit. Okay, so that's pretty leveled and pretty centered. And so now I'm just going to kind of use the wheel to help me a little bit to squish this clay up into this crevice between the two pieces. So the wet clay is getting squeezed in there. The inside as well. So that's basically on there, but personally, I think aesthetically, it might look nicer if I put a little tiny coil in there to smooth out that divot that's happening. So I'm going to take a coil and just kind of flatten it into there. I'm not really using this fat coil to stick out. I'm just pressing the clay, flattening it into the divot where the two pieces join together. I don't really want it to be obvious that this wasn't thrown together. I mean, I'm not trying to be, dishonest about it, but I'm just, I like the way it looks better if it has a smoother transition. A little water on it so it works better with my finger. Now I'll take a trim tool and just clean up the shape a little bit. And we have a nice transition from the pot to the ring. And now this is the top lip of the jar. Now you can also, if you want to, you can put a little bit of clay on this inside seam as well with a thin coil. I learned to call these fillets, which are used to make sure that seams don't come apart. They're like just little skinny coils that you press into a seam to make sure that nothing bad happens there. Got a reinforced spot. So just go all the way around and put a little bit of clay in there, coiled clay in there. And then sort of throw it. I have a low spot and put a little bit more in. Try to have about the same amount of clay all the way around so that nice. And then I'll take my sponge and kind of smooth that out. And now we have a nice transition on the inside as well. And any cleaning up and trimming you might want to do to this top piece should probably happen at this point. This one's a little bit rough as far as, it's got some ridges that I don't really like. I'm going to smooth them out a little bit, and then we'll move on to joining another part together. So this piece is ready to come off the wheel, and well, maybe I'll sort of see that seam a little bit, can't we? Let's clean that up a little bit more. Okay, so now we can move on to another section of the pot. Okay, so I went ahead and joined these two pieces together. This is the bottom part of the pot, and this is a ring, a hollow ring. And it was just the same process as what I did with, that I just showed you with the top part of the pot. So I went ahead and did it. And now I'm going to show you something else. When you're joining the two pieces of pot together that you've measured with your calipers to match, there can be a slight difference, but hopefully you got it pretty close. One of the things to think about in joining these together is that you need to be able to join the pot together by reaching inside as much as you can all the way through the process. So let's say, for example, if you have a really tall pot that you've made and you've got 6 sections of pot that you're joining and it's a really big piece, start from the bottom and go up, because you're not going to be able to reach inside from the bottom if you build it upside down when you put the bottom on. So build it right side up and build it from the bottom up on the wheel so that you can get your hand in there and clean up those seams. Otherwise you're going to have really big messy seams inside your pot that you can't reach. And so that's what I'm going to do now, is I've set the pot right side up. This is the foot down here, this big ring that I put on, and then the bottom part of the pot is going to, then I'm going to put the center piece on now. And I have a ring that I'm going to put, that it was just thrown as a ring cylinder, the thickness of this pot to sit right here. I've already scored and wetted this area. And now I'm going to bring this ring over, and it's going to sit on the pot like this. But we're going to put a coil of clay in between, which will help us to sort of fudge if there's a little bit of discrepancy there, but also to make it sit better and join better. I'm going to make sure that this edge gets nice and wet and scored as well. So get that done. Okay, set that back over here. And then I'll get my coil of clay on here. This is nice and wet now at the top. Get my coil of clay on there. And I find it's nice to have these rolled out in advance, just because you don't have to stop your process to go and roll out coils. I like to roll a bunch of coils before I get going with the joining process. Okay, and then we're going to get that attached really well, just like we did before. That's important. And that gives us a nice wet, well not wet, but soft area to join with where it's gonna attach better. Get it real sticky where you have the sort of dry clay on your pot and then join that coil on. You're gonna have a good seam. I don't usually get cracks where I've joined the pot. I might get a stress crack just from the process of firing that goes through the form in a different way. I don't usually get cracks where I put them together. And again, get that wet. And I'm going to bring this ring back. And you see how important it is that your clay is dry enough to not bend all around when you pick it up. Especially this piece is going to want to do that. So be real sure that you've got that nice and stiff to be able to join it. And now I'm just going to see how we're doing. That's not bad. I want to tap that a little bit. That's better. Pretty good. Okay. So it's level. And I think it's centered. Let's give it a try and see. Pretty good. All right, so now I'm just going to join it together. Now, one of the things that you can do with when you're joining this piece is you're going to want to sort of punch it after you're done cleaning up this seam. You're going to want to punch it from the inside to sort of make that seam invisible, and I'll show you what I mean by that. Cut away if you want. So we got it joined together, and now what I'm going to do is try to make it so that the shape doesn't betray where we've joined it. Occasionally, I've put a ring, like a hollow ring, in between the sections, just so that it has an additional sort of sculptural feeling, and then it doesn't really have to be carefully hidden. But it's nice if you can't tell where your pot is joined together. You don't want people to really be picking out the seams of your joins. Just give them the illusion of a nice big pot. So I'm cleaning the seam. The seam got pushed in a little bit from being paddled, so I'm smoothing it on the inside again because it kind of squeezed inward. Smoothing that. And so see, you wouldn't be able to do this if you had the pot upside down. Wouldn't be able to reach inside and fix that seam. Alright, so I'm going to paddle it, turn it, hold it from the inside against that seam. Oops, I knew that was going to happen. I gotta get my glasses tightened. This can take a little bit of work, and in fact, something I like to do also is to take the trim tool and just kind of clean that up this way. And just really sort of concealing where the joint was. I think that makes it nicer. good from the outside. And then I also have, let's see, I think here it is. I have the top part of a throwing tool that had a really long stick on it. And the top part, separate from the stick, makes a really good big loop tool for reaching inside big pots to trim the seams. And so it's a nice size loop. Taking the handle off means I can get my hand inside here. So I'm going to turn the wheel on just a little bit. And then stand up and just kind of peel out the bulge of the seam. And you're going to want to clean these seams as you go, because if you don't, you'll get to a point where you can't reach them. So as you go along, clean the seams inside and out. Make the pot nice and smooth on both sides. And I'm getting quite a bit of clay out from that seam. It's going to make me need to clean the bottom as well here. Now another thing I want to comment on is you want to make your pot all about the same thickness as much as you possibly can. So the rings that you're throwing, the hollow rings that you're throwing, need to be reasonably thin and approximately the same as the walls of the pot that you're going to attach them to. And the reason for that is that there's several stages of heating up and shrinking. So you're going to have the drying process where things shrink, and then you're going to have the first fire, the bisque, where things shrink again, expansion and contraction happening, and then it's going to shrink again for the glaze fire. So when the clay is moving, you want the whole thing to move together. If you have areas that are thick and thin from each other that are dramatically different, you may have them shrinking and changing at different rates, and therefore possibly pulling apart. So what you want throughout your form is consistency. All right, so I like to go back after I've walked away from it and let it dry a little bit. I like to go back and check that seam, because sometimes, because this is wetter clay where the seam is, you're going to have a little shrink back, and you want to go back and clean that up again. But you can do that on the table. You don't have to do it on the wheel. Get it as nice as you can while you're here, and then in the drying process, check it again. Don't just let it completely dry before you give it another look, and maybe have to clean that seam again, because you don't want people going, oh, I see where your sections are. You know, I mean, because the first time I did this, my seams were a little sloppy, and it was always the first thing people said to me was, oh, I see how you built this. You know, and you sort of don't want that to be the conversation. You want them to be talking about what you did design-wise, or maybe you did a painting or a carving on the pot, you know, and made it into a piece of art. That's what you want them to be talking to you about, not about your process of joining sections together. So I think it's nicer if you get the seam to disappear. Okay, now we're gonna have to move on to another part. Okay, so we've got the pots assembled now, and what we want to do now is to put some handles on it on either side. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this ring in half with this nice sharp tool. Any sort of blade that you have is good, but I bought these nice serrated knives for this kind of thing. It makes it a little easier. Just cut it right in half. And then just to make sure they're exactly the same, I like to set them on top of each other and line them up, just so they don't have discrepancies. Just sort of make sure that they're the same. Okay, so these two handles are the same. Now the hole that I punched is on this side, so I'm gonna have to put another hole on this one with my needle tool. Because we are gonna close it off again once we put it on the piece. So you can see how these are hollow and not entirely equally on both sides, but still reasonably the same. And so what we're gonna do is we're gonna attach these to the form, and we're gonna look at the form and see where do we think it would look good attached. I think that this bulge right here would be a good spot to attach it there. Now, they don't have to sit perfectly flat against the pot because we're gonna put a ring of clay there. And so once I figured out the first handle, I'm gonna make sure that it's vertical before I make any marks. And then I'm just gonna kind of mark where that is. On the pot, a little mark there. And then I'm just gonna get that really scored up. I don't really want to cut a hole because then you see the hole through the pot. And also, you know, if you're making a pot that you're gonna put water in and flowers and stuff like that, you don't want a hole in the pot that goes into the handle. You'll have a place where things can rot. So I don't like to put a hole through the pot when I'm doing this. And then I get this wet where I'm joining, and this piece of clay is pretty dry, so I'm really gonna need to make sure I get this soaked with the handle so that we don't have the handle pulling away from the pot after we put it on. So get that nice and wet. And I already have a coil rolled out again for clay to use for joining things together. I always like to put a buffer in there, something that's nice and soft. So that if something's a little on the hard side like this guy, you know, when you get that end really sticky, put a little bit of fresh clay on it, you're gonna have a better chance of not getting cracked later. And you always wanna do everything you can to avoid that. Alright, so what I like to do is I like to make a little circle of clay like this, and I attach that where I made my score marks on the piece. So you know, it's just roughly where I made the marks, right on top of them, as a place, it's sort of like to glue the handle on. And I'll do that again down here. Make a circle, push it on. Okay. Now, what I have to think about is that gravity is going to do some work on this when I walk away. So even if I get this to stay on nice while I'm here, I need to prop it so that it doesn't pull down. Okay? So you just get whatever jar or whatever object you have that's about the right height. And then I think I'm going to put a sponge here as well. You should have something squishy. If you don't have something that can give a little bit, like paper or sponge, when this pushes down with shrinkage, you're going to just crack it off. So you got to have something soft. And you don't need to leave this here forever. You just need to leave it long enough that you feel like it's not really going to pull away. And that might be a couple of days. All right, so I'm going to get this, kind of force it onto the clay spots that I made. Look at it and see that it's not crooked. It's pretty good. All right, and then just really squish it on pretty good like that. And then get it attached. And maybe I'll clean up this bottom real quick so that I can put the support in there. Is this in the way? Can you see?
It's good.
kind of clean up under there first of all, and then get this under here. And this needs to be a good tight fit, so that feels a little bit loose. I'm going to fold the sponge and see if that's good enough. I think that'll do it. But you just want a little bit of pressure back on it so that it, as it wants to pull down with the gravity, it doesn't have anywhere to go. Okay? And then you just kind of clean that up, smooth it, make it look nice. Okay, we can do some more of that later. I'm going to show you how to get the other one on sort of appropriately, nicely. What I like to do is sort of take a tool and go up and sort of see where I am here, walk around, and then try to find myself at center, come down, and I think this is where I am right here. Okay, so let me look at it. And can you turn off the... Then if you can take a measuring tape, come around and see how you're doing. If it's about the same, I think I have a little more space here. I might want to move that circle over towards the front a little bit. You can also measure from the table if you want to, and sort of get an idea of where you're at. Okay, I think this one's a little higher. Let's see. No, that's about the same. Okay. Alright, so I'm going to get it on there and see how I feel about it. You can always change your mind a little bit. But do your best. I mean, eyeballing it and doing a little bit of measuring will get you there. Trying to get things lined up. Let's see. All right. Get that area scored up pretty good. Clay on there. And this is just going to be the same. Okay, so we've got these two handles on. Obviously, I need to do some more cleaning up and get them nice. But I want to show you one more thing that you should do. And just tear open some plastic and make a long strip with a plastic bag, like a truss, and pull it skinny like this. And take it around the handles out on their widest part, and you're going to tie it firmly so that there's tension on them. This is going to help you to keep this from getting cracks right where you've joined the handles, because that's really the most likely crack you're going to get in this process is right across here. So make sure you have a truss on here while it's setting up, and the truss will loosen when the clay shrinks enough that it doesn't need it anymore, so it's kind of like you don't even have to keep an eye on it. And then, you know, make sure you have a lot of clay here that you're going to join with that kind of covers up that seam, and have something underneath that puts a little bit of tension against it so that gravity isn't trying to pull those down. This is important, and that, you know, at least overnight with all of this support before you take it all off, because you might want to go back and I know I like to carve on the piece, do little patterns and designs and other things before it dries completely. So you know, make sure that this support system stays on at least, like, I don't know, 12 hours or so before you try to do anything else to the piece. You can keep it damp, keep it wrapped up if you still need to do a lot of surface carving or altering, but this is an important step, so don't forget about the truss and the support for the handle. Okay? Thank you for watching.